All right, well, I think I'm going to get started. We are recording this, so if you know of anybody that's hopping in late, we can share the recording afterwards. But welcome to the 2021-2022 Community Impact Grant cycle. We just launched on July 9th, and we're super excited to engage with all of you in this way. And this is kind of a I'll speak to it in a moment here, but this is such an interesting transition time for all of us. So thank you for joining us today. We'll kind of just do, a pretty quick overview of a lot of the things that are already in the Community Impact Guidelines document that you all have probably already seen that's on our website. But we'll do just a quick chat introduction here in a moment, and I'll kind of share a little bit about our thinking behind the structure of this grant program. And then we'll kind of talk a little bit about our funding priorities and overarching goals, and give you the opportunity to ask any questions that might be kind of coming up for you, what we fund, what we don't fund, our eligibility requirements. There's a few things that are we're overemphasizing this year in this cycle around outcomes and learning and DEI. And we'll just kind of walk through the process timeline with you all and give you an opportunity to ask any questions. All right, so welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. For those of you that I don't know or that do not know me, I'll introduce myself. So my name's Lauren Leary, and I'm the Director of Community Impact at United Way. So that kind of just means that I oversee our grant making portfolio and some of our evaluation and program quality work. And I also kind of wear another hat at United Way as our Communities 211 liaison. So I've worked with, I think, a lot of you on this call on just ensuring that resources and services are up to date in that database, and that we can connect folks to resources that they need in the community. And I have been at United Way for it'll almost be a year now. I started on August 18th, and kind of jumped into fire response work in a different capacity and moved into this new role only in February. So I'm still kind of getting my sea legs and within the grant making space, and I'm learning so much from all of you every day. And it's just been such a joy to engage with you all in this capacity. I would love to learn a little bit more about you. So in the chat box, if you would please type your name, the agency that you're with, what your role is, and would love to hear if you have a favorite local eatery in Larimer County. I think a lot of us are, going out and about this summer, exploring new places. And so would love to hear if you've been somewhere recently that you're excited about. I was telling we had another info session yesterday, and I was telling that group that we went camping last weekend and stopped at Vern's. I was born in Fort Collins, and I've never been to Vern's up in LaPorte. And so we stopped there for some cinnamon rolls, and holy moly, their cinnamon rolls are like this big. I don't know if you've been there, but it's worth stopping by for a cinnamon roll. So I recommend it. Thanks, Jen, for putting your information. 415 restaurant. I just saw that in Yelp, and it had good reviews. I'll have to check that out.
It is. It's really good.
Consuelo's, Nick's Italian. Interesting. The regional. Thanks for sharing. Okay, this is exciting. All right. Well, it's been quite the year for all of us. I think we keep saying that, but I keep finding myself being like, wow, what a year. And can you already believe it, that it's almost been 7 months into 2021 already? Our community has endured so much together over the past year and a half, from COVID to a racial reckoning and our state's biggest wildfire, and then also recovery efforts from that fire into this fire season. I think we've all been kind of in this place of picking up the pieces and just trying to take a deep breath in survival mode. And I think a lot of us have been evaluating our priorities as we emerge into kind of recovery and trying to focus on resiliency. I think that we can all agree that we can't go back to what was normal before COVID. COVID exposed a lot of system inefficiencies and exacerbated disparities that we all already knew existed. And as with most of you personally and within the agencies that you work, I think, we at United Way are taking this time to kind of pause and reflect, and lean in, listen to all of you and to our community, and kind of better understand what our role is as we emerge out of all of this. What is our role as a funding agency, as a convener, as a steward of, marshaling resources in the community. And I'm sure many of you have been following our work and kind of observing some of the transitions that United Way of Larimer County have been going through over the past few years. We just transitioned out of a 6-year initiative of collective impact from 2014 to 2020, which some of you were engaged in. And through that time, we funded collaborative, or for those of you that aren't familiar with that process, we funded collaborative working groups in three-year grant cycles where the groups submitted joint applications. They established and collected shared outcomes that aligned to move the needle on established community level indicators. And we're still kind of wrapping up that process and learning about what worked well and what didn't. We hired an external evaluator from Colorado State University that's wrapping up kind of a focus group evaluation on just the process of that and if that process actually did yield any impact that we intended. And then, last year was kind of transitioning out of that process. And so we had agencies apply on their own. We had made some minor tweaks to our priority areas, but nothing significant. And this year we're also, we're still reeling from the impacts of COVID, and we're trying to kind of best understand where to direct private philanthropic funds and leverage those funds, as we all know that, a significant windfall of funding is coming down from the federal government. And so what does that mean for private philanthropy at this moment, and how can we kind of take advantage of this moment with the funds that we do have? We have a new leader at the helm, Deirdre Sullivan, who I think a lot of you might know. And if you haven't had the opportunity, I highly recommend getting to know her. We have a relatively new community impact staff, myself and a couple others that, we're forming a new team with new ideas. We're hiring a new vice president of impact. And so there's just been a lot of transition recently. And so within this grant cycle, you'll see kind of a few overarching themes that we're focusing on. So no significant pivots. We're just kind of diving deeper into a few areas that we really value. So with these funds, we really kind of are aiming to drive systems change. We want to better understand how your agency or program is leading systems change in our community and how it's addressing those root causes. So in the full application, for example, we'll ask you what the root causes of the need for your program are, and how do your services address the root causes or incorporate prevention strategies specifically. We want to know how you are actively working to reduce the need for your program, and how you are engaging in conversations around policy or other systems level change. We also want to know how your agency is striving to reduce duplicative efforts in our community. So for example, the SNAP gap. Colorado has one of the lowest participation rates in the US for folks who are eligible for SNAP. So if you provide food assistance or case management, for example, how are you promoting SNAP or ensuring families are screened for this program before offering services or referring out? It's also come sharply into focus, I think, for all of us, how important addressing disparities across different groups in our community is. So we want to partner with our funded agencies on how we can reduce these disparities by race and ethnicity, for example. And that starts with really strengthening organizational data culture and collecting and disaggregating demographic data, which is something that we're working on internally, is what disparities exist that we can really have an impact on and measure, and how do we work with the community to do that in a way that is equitable also. We also want to ensure that we're promoting a culture of organizational learning and funding agencies that value and can demonstrate, by allocating resources to continuous quality improvement processes. So there's also a lot of language around kind of continuous quality improvement and what that looks like. And I think, the majority of you know that our mission in the community is to lead philanthropy, ensuring that gifts of time, talent, and treasure address today's greatest needs and reduce tomorrow's. And we're still here to address today's greatest needs through a lot of our grant funding and the work that we do. But this grant cycle is kind of really geared towards prioritizing addressing tomorrow's needs and what we can do to kind of be more pivot a little bit to be a little bit more preventative in nature. We also, throughout this grant cycle and through all of our interactions with you and our grant programs, we're learning about how we can be more equitable and inclusive, and we want to identify ways that, are creative ways that we can reduce administrative burdens for you all. We want to learn from you about how to make this process more equitable and how we can create relationships with you that don't feel transactional in nature. How could we, for example, we're trying to eliminate, our interim reporting so that you just have a final report, and maybe we can have more conversations around the work that you're doing in your progress, as opposed to just submitting an interim report and it, sits on our shelves and you're probably wondering what we do with that data. So how can we have conversations around that data and really engage around the work that you're doing together? So we hope that through this process, we are able to add value to you as our partner, not only through this process, but just through our relationships with you all in general. And each year, our funding priorities and our overarching goals within our funding priorities are decided on by our board of directors each year. They're largely the same as last year, but we fine-tuned our focus in just a couple areas, which I'll talk about here shortly. Successful applicants will really demonstrate that their program outcomes align with these overarching goals. And if you have any questions about whether or not your program falls within these funding priority areas, or if your outcomes align with these goals that we've set, feel free to reach out to Morgan Vanek, who's also on the call. She's our senior nonprofit development manager, or myself, and we can kind of talk through your outcomes and how they align, or how you can maybe reframe some of your outcomes, or better understand how they do align, because I'm sure a lot of the work that you do really does kind of advance a lot of these areas. This year, agencies can submit only one, or you can submit multiple proposals, but only one proposal per funding pillar. So only one proposal within the youth and education priority area, and only one within financial stability. And I think the biggest change from previous years is our emphasis, or our priority area within the basic needs scope. So in previous years, we look at basic needs. I think we've called it essential needs, but we have funded rent and utility assistance, for example, under financial stability. And we feel this year, because there's a surge of ARPA funds trickling down to our community to address recovery needs, we're able to leverage our private philanthropic funds to meet more upstream preventative approaches. So we still have funding available to support basic needs, and we're still accepting applications for essential needs or basic needs. It's just a little bit less. So 17% of our total amount allocated to this process will be funded under the category of basic needs. I think the county has allocated $69 million to recovery efforts. Fort Collins has $28 million. Loveland has just over $9 million that they were allocated. And I think we've been learning that a lot of these funds can be allocated to use for food assistance programs, rent, mortgage, utility, and affordable housing, as well as infrastructure. And so we're still kind of listening to our partners at the county and within our municipalities to better understand where those funds will be allocated as we move through this grant process. With all of that being said, because we've structured this in a way that you will submit your pre-application first, if we receive a lot of requests for basic needs, and that seems to be the biggest priority, then, we might be able to shift focus a little bit. But at this point, that's kind of how we're thinking. It's hard to plan in that space. And I'm curious if I'll stop now to see if any of you have any questions about these funding priority areas or goals. We'll check the chat too. Okay, not seeing any questions in the chat yet, but feel free to pop questions in the chat or stop me, and we'll also carve out some time at the end of this for questions. So I won't go to, I won't walk or talk through each of all of the text on this slide, but these are the areas that we will fund, and that the costs or the requests that we will not fund. And nothing has really changed that significantly from previous years. One thing you will notice is that this year we will not fund through this grant program early childcare scholarships. We have in the past, but this past year, at the end of 2020, we received CARES funds from the county to pilot and launch our Leary County Child Care Fund. And so the parameters then were really around COVID and how some of our early childhood education providers were impacted by COVID, and supported them with some general operating support to offset costs associated with operating during COVID, and as well as providers could apply on behalf of families for scholarships. And we're continuing that model, and we're working with a group of providers and the Early Childhood Council of Leary County to determine kind of the next steps of that fund, how to equitably distribute the funding that we have. We're actively soliciting funds for childcare scholarships. So we encourage, if you are in that space of providing scholarships, please reach out to us and we can talk more about our Leary County Child Care Fund with you. Another area that we still are not funding is mental health support. We know that the county has a behavioral health tax initiative that passed, and there's quite a bit of funding, sustainable funding for some of that work. And so again, we're still trying to listen to our community, as we have been hearing that behavioral health is a critical need, and so I think we're still trying to learn what our role is in supporting some of that work. With that being said, there's a lot of programming that kind of straddles mental health, behavioral health, and social emotional learning. And so we will fund programs that have social emotional learning outcomes associated with our overarching goals. So if you have questions about that, feel free to reach out and we can kind of talk through your outcomes and your program structure. But I think we're really drawing the line at clinical interventions, treatment supports, those types of programming. We will not fund through the community impact grant program this year. And this is just our eligibility requirements. So agencies need to be a registered 501c3 entity or a fiscal sponsor of a charitable cause. They can be a faith-based organization or a public school district. Agencies need to be located in Leary County, and the programs or services that they request funding for us to support must benefit Leary County residents. So there's a question on the pre-application. Does your program benefit residents outside of Leary County? And that's just a flag for us to follow up with you to learn more about how you track your expenses, and if you do have a system in place to ensure that the funds that we award you will be dedicated to benefiting Leary County residents. We also are still requiring third-party accreditation for our funded partners. And so either you must be accredited already through GuideStar or the Better Business Bureau charity accreditation, or be well on your way or working towards accreditation by December 2021, the end of this year. And we've had, I think we've had a training on this in the past, and we also have resources to support you if this is something that you want to work towards. we're happy to kind of walk you through the steps. So reach out to us if this is something that your agency is looking to accomplish. And the only other outcome it is very critical is just ensuring that your outcomes align with our goals. Every year we do receive applications that aren't quite aligned. So I just encourage you to really think through, not only what the program is, but what the outcomes are that you're striving for. And if those outcomes really align with one of the previous slides I shared, that's really important. It's also very important to us that our funded partners demonstrate a commitment to strategic learning and that they're able to measure their progress toward advancing the community level goals that I spoke to earlier. A couple of years ago, we adopted the results-based accountability framework as a model to assess performance measures. The results-based accountability framework puts more of an emphasis on quality over quantity. And we still care about, how many people you serve, how many trainings you're providing, and those, what the direct products of your program are, or what your outputs. But most importantly, we want to know what the positive changes are that are a direct result of your program activities, or that's your outcomes, or how better off are people that your programs are having a direct impact on. We've had also a couple nonprofit excellence trainings. I think Morgan just facilitated an excellent grant writing session recently and kind of went into, what the difference is between an output and an outcome. And we're able to talk with you about that and how to structure those, if that's something that you're interested in. Successful applicants under this grant program will submit very well-structured and clear outcomes that indicate the changes in skills, knowledge, attitudes, behaviors, structures, systems that beneficiaries are achieving as a result of your program. And the outcomes must be measurable, attainable, or realistic, and also substantiated. In the application, we want to know why you believe your program will yield these outcomes. What evidence-based approaches or best or promising practices are you employing to obtain the results that you're seeking? And in the pre-application, question number 8 asks, what is the change you are hoping to accomplish with this program? So essentially, that question is asking for your outcomes. You will also be required to submit 2 outcomes in the full application. You've likely noticed that we're really emphasizing the importance of process evaluation, which is kind of the second results-based accountability question. How well did you do it? And I think this is one of the hardest aspects of working at a nonprofit, in my experience, is you receive an award, you're ready to go, and then a year later, after implementation, the program's over and you have to apply for the next funding. Or it's hard for us working in nonprofits to kind of, we're so in the weeds, it's hard for us to kind of lift our head up and reflect on the work that we're doing, how we're doing the work that we're doing, if there's efficiencies that we could be implementing, if we could be better about extending outreach to diverse populations, how is there a sense of belonging across diverse populations within your program, and then being able to make those pivots and tweaks mid-program, mid-course. And so that's something at United Way of Larimer County, we're still working on really the process improvement piece of our work. And, we just had a meeting yesterday that Morgan facilitated around grant management processes and thinking about, our meeting structure, quarterly meetings, to really think through, how do we know that what we're doing is impactful instead of just a yearly retreat, or, so it's something that we're all working on, and it's just something that we value, and we would love to see a demonstration of ensuring that you have kind of process improvement or a continuous improvement process system in place at your agency. And I think you all know that we are committed to funding partners that align closely with our values and goals around advancing equity in our community. We're centering our equity work, or we're centering race within our equity work specifically, and addressing racial disparities, as we know that the most enduring and pervasive disparities are those based on race as a result of institutional and structural racism and historical oppression. We know that to address these disparities, we need to capture the right data and disaggregate that data by race and ethnicity, as well as other characteristics to see other inequities. But that way they become more evident and we can actually take action to address them. And we know that that's hard. We're working internally also around what racial disparities we're seeing in our community. And so the funded partners that we support through this grant cycle will really demonstrate a commitment to improving in this space. We'll also be asking for disaggregated demographic data in your final reports. And we know that not everyone is able to collect all of that data. Race and ethnicity can be a very sensitive data point to collect, but it's something that we want to work closely with you on. How can you collect that data? How can you be better about analyzing what those disparities are and taking action internally to close some of those gaps? And so we'll be working closely with you to better understand what that might look like for you. So this timeline is outlined in our community impact guidelines document, but some notable dates, I think, for all of you is, we opened our pre-app process on July 9th, and it will close on July 23rd by 5 p.m. We will not be accepting any extensions unless there's a technical issue or logistical issue with our grants management system. So I encourage you strongly to just submit a pre-application if you feel that you are even closely aligned with the goals that I spoke to earlier. I think this overview today here, we've carved out an hour and 15 minutes of your time, and I think we'll be ending shortly. So I encourage you, if you have 15 to 30 minutes after this, you can just hop in the grants portal and submit your pre-application. It should be pretty easy if you have all of the information ready. After the pre-applications are submitted, we will send those to our CI, our Community Impact Committee group, which is comprised of around 14 community members. And this year, in the past, this group of individuals has had to read through 45 to 50 applications that span the range of early childhood education to financial stability and housing and food. And it's a lot of reading and a lot of understanding of the community landscape and unique challenges and barriers to each of those sectors. So last year, the group thought that it'd be interesting to kind of try having more of a sector-based, smaller group focused approach. So we have about 2 to 3 community impact committee members per focus area, really, who have taken the time to commit to strategic learning around, each of those sector areas. And so they will be reviewing your pre-applications to not only determine eligibility, but determine what further questions do they need to make an informed decision between your proposal and another proposal, for example. And then on August 16th, we will notify you of our decision to move forward with a full application, and we will share the full application with you, as well as review criteria, so that we can be a little bit more transparent around exactly, how our scoring system and how each question is weighted. You can really see what our priorities are and which aspects we value more through our weighting system. So hopefully that'll help you better understand a little bit of where we're coming from. And you will have 5 weeks to complete your application. You will need to submit your application by September 17th at 5 p.m. also. And then shortly after that, we will kind of come back together with our Community Impact Committee members and see what other lingering questions they have. We have a grant range of about $5,000 to $40,000 is kind of the request range that we'll accept proposals under. Our typical award, our average or our mean award amount is around $15,000. And so requests that are on the higher end of that range, we will reach out to and schedule a site visit with, just to get a better sense of your program. As well as if you're a new agency that we haven't partnered with in a while or haven't funded with in a while, I think our community committee would like to just get to know you better, just informally, just to see, you know, how the work you're doing really integrates into some of this recovery space that we're all in, and just to learn, you know, more about your work. And then shortly after, on November 3rd, our committee will meet to allocate funding and recommend awards. They will then send those awards to our board of directors, who will approve them on November 17th. And then that following week, the week of November 22nd, is when our awards will be announced to each of you, and we'll start our contract process. Our first payment will be December 30th. Our second will be June 30th. So there'll be 2 payment installments. And throughout the spring, we will conduct some site visits, which is always a really fun opportunity for us to kind of deepen the relationship with you. We haven't been able to do site visits for the past year and a half or so because of COVID. So I think this will be a really great opportunity just for us to learn more about the work that you're doing, and like I said, deepen our relationship with each of you. And then grant reports will be due on January 15th, 2022. And I mentioned earlier that we will not be requiring interim reports this year, just final reports. We feel that the site visits that we'll do in the spring will, we'll be able to learn enough through that process instead of having to have you submit an interim report. And next steps would just be how to apply. If you feel that you really align with this, I encourage you to review our community impact guidelines document again, and then just ensure that you are eligible, and that you are either have third-party accreditation, or you're on track to be third-party accredited by December 2021. And then you can access our grant portal through our website and create our grant portal is SurveyMonkey Apply. So you'll create a user profile, and it's pretty user friendly, but every once in a while there are technical issues. And so feel free to reach out if you are experiencing any of that. And that's all I have for you today. So I'd love to open it up if you have any questions or clarification that we can provide for you at this time. And if there's no questions, then feel free to always reach out via email also. Thank you, Jessica. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for attending. Hopefully we can connect soon. Great to see you all. Happy Almost Friday. Bye.
Thanks, Lauren. I had a quick question for you.
Oh, sure.
I don't know. I submitted my interim report and it said that it was submitted like on the portal, but I keep getting the reminder prompts. So I just wanted to confirm that it actually really was submitted.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. I know. We had somebody else reach out about that too, and you are good to go. Okay. Everything is in there. I think we just, within our system, we have to create automations.
Sure.
And so that's I think that was like
I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. I'm like, wait, why does it keep reminding me?
I know, you're like, I did this. I checked it off.
Right. The green check is there. Awesome. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much. And I look forward to when we connect again, whenever that date is.
All right, sounds good, Jen. Thank you. Okay. I'll stay on the call too if anybody else wants to stay like later and ask questions. Bye, Jen.
Oh, I'd like to ask a question if you're going to hang out there, yeah. Lauren. Could you talk a little bit more about racially disaggregated data? And I'm thinking not so much on the collection side for the program, but on, identifying or writing that needs statement, to find that information for our community, that demographic information that's actually, you can disaggregate by race is really hard.
It is really hard. And I think, first you have to, collect the data in order to disaggregate it. But I think we see a lot of times, and I've worked in nonprofits too, where we're reporting out or we're only looking at an aggregate level of, survey, like post-survey responses that come through, for example, and it's 75% of youth that participated in a career program find jobs within the 6-month mark, for example. So that's interesting to know, but of that 70% of youth, what is the racial breakdown? Is it, all white youth? Is it majority white youth? And maybe the others are of Latinx, or maybe, there's like some other disparity. And then why is that? Kind of diving deeper into better understanding. Could our services be more inclusive in some way? Is it because there's like not Spanish translation, or, so then we can kind of further identify what, is it a sense of belonging? Does that?
I'm not thinking so much about the agency collecting their own data on their programs and the people and their program participants. I'm thinking about community level indicators that establish the need for the program that would typically appear in a needs statement in a grant, for example. So, a lot of our county and city level data, there's no way to disaggregate it. It's hard to understand the relationship between race and structural inequities,
Sure.
because you can't get that data, you can't disaggregate it.
And that's a really good question. I think that's something that we're also thinking about at United Way, is within our pillars, within youth and education, what are those community level racial disparities that we don't know because they aren't being tracked currently, maybe,
right?
Or like within 3rd grade reading levels,
right?
And so
right,
then,
or expulsion rates, or
and so then it's a matter of connecting with community partners to see, okay, so how do we encourage that conversation to start around disaggregating that data, and whose responsibility is it? And they're probably collecting the data, I would think, if it was a school district, or another entity that's sharing community level indicators, or the county. But so, how are we having that conversation internally? And then at least in our, as far as funding agencies, are they demonstrating that they're having those conversations and that they're committed to moving the needle in that work? And, how can we just start working towards this space together?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I that's helpful in that I'm glad to know I'm not the only one who's struggling to, it's kind of like we know that it's happening, but like getting the data points to justify what we know and what we know anecdotally, we know from lived experience, that demonstrates that we have community-wide issue here with these structural inequities, and that we know we can demonstrate are negatively impacting people of color, for example, or LGBTQ, or,
Yeah, well, and I think that's also something that we've been talking about internally, is it's like the chicken or the egg. And so that's also kind of why we're thinking, we also need to provide capacity building trainings for agencies so that they can collect that data, so that we can have that data and that can all roll up. And so, not only like we can't require everyone to disaggregate data, because not a lot of people are able to at this point, or the data that they get is from a partner. And so it's really just looking at that commitment on our end, but then also what is our role in providing training and changing our workflows and I think a lot of us we're just all in a learning space. If anybody else on the call is interested in this conversation or has anything.
Right. That could be like a whole, like, I don't know, conversation series or something, like figure it out, together.
Yeah, we've talked about too, like having a cohort of our funded partners, like, could that be a conversation that we're all talking about? How are we all collecting this data and whose role is it? And who's responsible for then communicating it? And what does it mean? And I mean, that's what we're talking about internally. So yeah, it's an interesting conversation. I'd love to continue this conversation with you, Maggie.
Yeah, I would too. It's nice to meet you, by the way.
I know you too. Yeah, we haven't met yet, so.
Yeah, well, COVID.
I know.
Trying to get out more.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone else that's on the call still listening in. If this conversation is of interest to you all, let's continue it and touch base.
Great.
Soon.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Maggie. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Lauren, this is Cheryl, and I had a quick question too.
Hi, Cheryl.
Sorry, my camera's not working, and
No worries.
I'm not going to worry about it. So there was other fish to fry.
Yeah.
So one of the questions I have, we do basic needs services here at House Neighborly Service, and when you went over the pillars, and one of them was financial stability, and look, I just need a point of clarification. Is food, because we do food baskets, and that's one of the primary things our United Way funding helps with. Is that considered in that financial stability, or is it a basic need? Because we call it a basic needs service, as it sounds like you guys are calling it an essential, which is not going to be funded as much. So am I focusing more on that financial stability? Because we truly believe by somebody getting a week's worth of groceries, it relieves their financial burden and helps them to put that money towards their housing or their car insurance, et cetera, like that. So I'm just wanting to make sure that I'm looking at this the same. Funding also helps with utilities. So it sounds like you are putting utilities in the essentials, which won't be funded as much. But food is in financial stability. Is that correct?
Yeah, good question. And I think food is a little bit of a gray area. And we are accepting applications for food stability. For basic needs. I do think that food falls under basic needs, as you mentioned. That's kind of how you believe you see it too. But we've always seen that's always kind of been underneath financial stability. So a lot of our financial stability programs that we have funded have been basic needs also.
Right.
I mentioned we have about 17,000 or 17% of our total, so $50,000 allocated for basic needs this year. And so I still encourage you to submit a pre-application. I think we're just hearing from the community that there's funding out there for food that's coming down from ARPA, because it's closely tied to impacts of COVID. And this is also still a conversation that, I think that we'd love to have is there enough funding to cover these, food in this sense?
Yeah, okay, that helps, because one of the things that we're seeing is, especially our elderly and those who are on fixed incomes, is they still have great need. They don't have enough income to make it through to the end of the month. And that's something that we are really looking at to see, okay, what do we need to adjust to help them? For a lot of families with children right now, they have many resources, more with the schools open for the summer and different things with the programs the schools have. But we definitely want to make sure that we are appropriately looking at the funding and the services that we provide, and what does the future look like with that.
And Cheryl, I think if you make that distinction too with the older adult population, I think that would resonate with our committee also. So I definitely encourage you to submit a pre-application and explain that unique piece. I think within food stability, like there's there are a lot of families or programs that are handing out food vouchers, you know, because of COVID. And that's very much like kind of a one-time food assistance request, basic need, essential need right now, as a result of maybe, you know, a short-term disability or whatever it may be. That's kind of like, right now we need this food, but if, you know, the older adult population might be a little different. So I recommend you make that distinction.
Well, and we also I just did a report for Berthoud, you know, because we have offices in Berthoud and Loveland. Berthoud has such limited resources that we actually have seen a 74% increase from last
Wow.
year with Berthoud. So, you know, some of the, like the utility money, some of it that we get here in Loveland, we can't use for Berthoud because of just different stipulations. You know, we get some City of Loveland funding, we can't use it on Berthoud residents. And some of our EOC money can't be used for like Berthoud water and things like that. So there's a huge need in Berthoud with even utility assistance. So that's part of what we're seeing with all of this.
Well, and that's helpful for us to know too. And so definitely articulate that also.
Okay.
Especially because I think there's a lot of funding in the Fort Collins area, and we're trying to make sure that our funding is distributed countywide. So yeah, let us know about what you're seeing.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate it. This is always good stuff. So we appreciate your work.
All right. Well, I'm happy that you were able to join us, and
Yeah.
always feel free to reach out with these questions.
Oh, I will.
It's informative. It's educational for us. It helps us make
exactly.
better, more informed decisions. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. You guys have a wonderful day.
Bye, Cheryl.
Thanks.
Bye,
Thanks, Laura.
Sue.
Well, take care.
All right. Bye. Thanks, Sue. Good to see you.